My name is Olivia, and from an outsider's perspective, my family seemed picture perfect. We lived in an extravagant mansion in the wealthiest part of town, complete with a sprawling swimming pool and a garage spacious enough to house three of my father's luxury cars. He had built his company from scratch, transforming it into a thriving enterprise that provided us with more than we could ever need. As for my mother, Victoria, she made sure everyone knew just how successful we were. "Darling, I absolutely need this new Gucci bag," she would declare to my father at least once a week. "Everyone at the country club has one, and I can't possibly be seen carrying last season's model." Without hesitation, my father would smile, pull out his credit card, and hand it over, no questions asked. That was their dynamic. She asked, he provided. My mother had never worked a single day in her life, but when it came to spending money, she was an expert. Each month brought a fresh batch of designer outfits, luxurious spa visits, and lavish trips to far-off resorts. Social media was her stage, where she curated a perfect life for the world to see. Meanwhile, I was left in the care of an ever-changing lineup of nannies. They came and went just as frequently as my mother's handbags, dismissed for the most trivial reasons. Yet, there was one who stood out, Miss Emily. She wasn't like the others. She genuinely cared about me, and it showed. She helped me with homework, read me bedtime stories, and even taught me how to bake cookies. For the first time, I felt like I had someone who truly saw me. But like all the rest, she didn't last. One afternoon, my mother stormed into the room, her voice dripping with accusation. I caught her wearing one of my silk scarves, she announced with feigned outrage. I knew without a doubt that Miss Emily would never do such a thing. But in my mother's world, staff had to be reminded of their place. Then everything changed. I was 14 when my father's relentless work schedule took its toll. Lately, he had been staying at the office late into the night, trying to finalize an important business deal. My mother, oblivious to his exhaustion, was far too busy planning her next luxurious getaway to the Maldives. And then, the phone rang. I can still hear the way my mother's scream echoed through the vast, marble-lined halls of our home. My father had collapsed at work. A massive heart attack, they said. By the time paramedics arrived, it was already too late. Just like that, he was gone. The funeral was a haze of somber whispers and elegant black attire. I stood there, feeling nothing but emptiness, while my mother played the role of the heartbroken widow flawlessly. But I knew her grief wasn't for the man she had lost. It was for the lifestyle that was slipping through her fingers. The moment she stepped into my father's office and sank into his chair, I knew we were headed for disaster. Spinning around playfully, she adjusted her impeccably tailored blazer before calling for an emergency meeting with all department heads. I watched from the doorway as she tried to embody a powerful CEO, but all I saw was a woman desperately clinging to an illusion. "I learned everything about this business from my husband," she announced with confidence, addressing a room filled with skeptical faces. "We're going to take this company to new heights." I wanted to scream. She had never taken an interest in my father's work, never asked about his strategies, never once cared about anything beyond the annual Christmas party. Yet here she was, making bold claims about business expansion and financial planning, topics she barely understood. That evening at dinner, she couldn't stop gushing about her newfound role. "Olivia, did you know your father had all these ridiculous spreadsheets? I've simplified everything. Who needs numbers when you have good instincts?" I tried to reason with her. "Mom, maybe you should bring in someone with experience? Someone who can help you run things properly." She waved me off with a dismissive laugh. "Oh, darling, don't be ridiculous. I'm doing just fine. You should hear how impressed everyone is with my natural business sense." But no one was impressed. Over the next few months, I watched as my father's most trusted employees walked out the door, one by one. First, his longtime CFO resigned. Then the operations manager. Soon, even lower-level employees were scrambling to leave. I overheard hushed conversations about overdue payments, failed deals, and rising debt. My mother, however, remained unfazed. She had started dipping into company funds to support her lavish lifestyle, insisting it was her right as CEO. When I confronted her about it, She merely patted my head, her tone condescending. "Sweetheart, you're too young to understand how business works." Every family gathering turned into a stage for my mother's delusions. She would boast to our relatives, her voice brimming with unwarranted confidence. "The company has never been better," she'd declare. "I've modernized everything. Robert would be so proud." But I knew the truth. My father wouldn't have been proud, he would have been devastated. Even at 15, I could see the inevitable collapse looming over us like a storm waiting to break. The final blow arrived just before my 16th birthday. It was a Tuesday morning when the bankruptcy notice landed on our doorstep, right after my mother had placed an order for expensive new office furniture for her so-called business empire. We lost everything. The company was sold to cover outstanding debts, but it barely made a dent. Soon, our house was gone too. I stood by as movers packed away our luxury furniture and my mother's collection of designer clothes, her entire identity being boxed up and carried out the door. We relocated to a small house on the outskirts of town, the kind of neighborhood my mother once looked down on with disdain. The only financial safety net left was my college fund, a trust my father had secured, ensuring she couldn't access it. But that didn't stop her from trying. "Olivia, darling," she'd say in a saccharine tone, "you know we could really use that money right now. We can always figure out your college expenses later." "No, Mom," I'd respond firmly. "That money is for my education." Her expression would harden, the sweetness vanishing in an instant. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? Watching your own mother struggle while you sit on a pile of money." After every argument, she would freeze me out, refusing to speak for days. But I refused to give in. I had seen how fast money disappeared in her hands, and I wasn't about to let her drag my future down with her. The next 2 years were filled with tension, icy silence, and endless battles over money. Conversations were few, and when we did speak, it always ended in a fight. By the time my high school graduation arrived, she had made her feelings about it painfully clear. That morning, she barely looked up from her coffee cup. "Why should I throw you a graduation party?" she muttered. "You won't even help your own mother when she needs it." I had already been accepted to Everett University, a well-regarded school 3 states away. She didn't know yet, but I had chosen it specifically for the distance. As soon as the graduation ceremony ended, I broke the news. "You're abandoning me," she gasped, clutching her chest as if wounded. "After everything?" "I'm not abandoning you, Mom," I said calmly. "I'm going to college, just like Dad wanted." Barrett felt like freedom. The dorm room was small compared to my childhood bedroom, but it was mine. No more guilt trips, no more tense silences, no more walking on eggshells. I stretched my father's money as far as I could: cheap meals, second-hand textbooks, no extravagant spring break trips. Every holiday, I made the obligatory call home. "Hi, Mom. How are you?" "Oh, surviving," she'd sigh dramatically. "Barely. Unlike some people, I don't have a trust fund to live off of." She never called me first. Not once in 4 years. But I didn't care. I was too busy building my own life. By the time I graduated with honors, I had already secured a position at Bennett and Partners. I moved into a modest apartment in the city and threw myself into work. It turned out I was good at what I did, really good. Within 2 years, I had been promoted twice. Then came the phone call. It was Christmas, and I was making my usual check-in. "The heating's broken again," she complained. "I can barely afford groceries, let alone repairs. But don't worry about me. I'll just wear 3 sweaters and eat crackers." Something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the security of my latest raise, or maybe I was just exhausted from years of guilt. Before I even realized it, I was saying, "I'll come visit next week." When I arrived, I had a plan. The house was in worse shape than I remembered: peeling paint, clogged gutters, outdated carpet. When my mother opened the door, she wore the same martyr-like expression I had grown up with. Over coffee, I told her plainly, "I'm doing well at work. I'd like to help. I can send you $1,000 a month, and we can start fixing up the house." For the first time in years, I saw a light return to her eyes. Within weeks, the house had fresh paint, new carpets, and working heat. Slowly, we fell into a new rhythm. She began calling with dinner invitations, her voice warm and eager. "Olivia, sweetie, I was thinking we could try that new Italian place on Mason Street. Nothing fancy, just a nice family dinner. I've invited Aunt Linda and Uncle Frank." These dinners became our tradition. My mother, who once only dined at the most exclusive restaurants, now picked modest places, where entrees were under $30 and the wine list wasn't pages long. Some nights, it was just the two of us at dinner. Other times, my mother would extend the invitation to Aunt Linda, Uncle Frank, or her longtime friend Helen. The check usually hovered around $200, and I always paid without hesitation. I'll never forget the first time my mother openly bragged about me at one of these gatherings. We were at Mario's, a charming little Italian spot with red and white checkered tablecloths and candlelight flickering inside empty Chianti bottles. As she sipped her wine, she turned to Aunt Linda, her face glowing with pride. "Did I mention that Olivia just landed the Anderson account? It's the biggest client in her firm's history. My daughter is truly making a name for herself in the business world, just like her father did." For the first time, it felt real. Not like the superficial boasts of my childhood, when I was simply another accessory in her carefully curated image. This was different. She was genuinely proud of something I had built on my own. As time passed, our dinners became more frequent. Every couple of weeks, my mother would call with a new restaurant suggestion, always casual, never extravagant. She seemed to understand the boundary without me ever needing to say a word. She'd invite different combinations of family and friends, ensuring that no gathering ever felt routine or obligatory. Meanwhile, my career continued to gain momentum. I secured larger deals, earned significant bonuses, and eventually saved enough for a down payment on my own place. The mortgage was sizable, but I could manage it comfortably. Mom attended my housewarming party, and for once, she didn't make any passive-aggressive remarks about the square footage or the location. Instead, she pulled me into a tight embrace and simply said, "You've done so well, sweetie." When I upgraded my car, it felt only natural to pass my old one down to her. It was a 5-year-old Mercedes-Benz, still in excellent condition, and a far better option than the aging Toyota she had been coaxing along for years. She accepted it without hesitation. That was just the start. During a visit, I noticed she was still using a painfully slow dial-up internet connection. Without asking, I arranged for high-speed fiber installation. Then, when I realized she was keeping the house uncomfortably cold in the winter to cut costs, I quietly took over her utility bills. But the real turning point came when I scheduled my first business trip to New York. My mother had always dreamed of seeing a Broadway show, so I invited her along. When Aunt Linda casually mentioned she had never been to New York either, I went ahead and booked flights for the three of us. They were ideal travel companions, enthusiastic yet easygoing. They didn't expect luxury, perfectly content with comfortable hotels and cozy neighborhood diners. They opted to explore on foot rather than spend money on taxis, and spent entire afternoons in Central Park, simply enjoying the atmosphere. That trip set a new precedent. Whenever work took me to cities like Boston, Chicago, or San Francisco, I started bringing my mother and another relative or two along. They'd find their own ways to keep busy while I attended meetings, and in the evenings, we'd meet for dinner. They never demanded high-end shopping sprees or extravagant experiences, though I sometimes surprised them with theater tickets or a special boat tour. For the first time, I felt like I was truly seeing my mother for who she could have been before wealth and excess had distorted her priorities. Then, one Tuesday morning, the phone rang. I was buried in contract reviews at work when I heard her unmistakable, excited tone on the other end of the line. "Olivia, sweetheart, I've been thinking about my birthday next month. You do remember I'm turning 55, don't you?" "Of course, Mom. I was planning to come visit. Did you have something in mind?" "Oh, absolutely. This year, I want to celebrate properly. It's a big milestone, after all." Immediately, I started brainstorming. "How about a nice dinner at your place? We could invite Aunt Linda, Uncle Frank, and Helen. I can handle the catering, or we can order from that Italian restaurant you love." But she cut me off before I could finish. "Oh, no, darling, don't trouble yourself with that. I want to take care of everything this time. You've done so much for me. I'd like to handle my own celebration for once. Something in her voice should have made me pause, but I was just happy to see her taking the lead. Are you sure? I really don't mind helping. Absolutely positive. Just be there at 7. I'll text you the restaurant address. On the day of the celebration, I arrived in town early and checked into my usual hotel. Mom had sent me the name of a restaurant I didn't recognize, but I didn't think much of it until my taxi pulled up in front of La Belle Maison, the most exclusive, high-end restaurant in the city. The kind of place where menus come without prices and reservations are made months in advance. The head waiter led me through the opulent dining room, past the glittering crystal chandeliers and the gold-trimmed walls, toward an exclusive private section at the back. The moment I stepped inside, my breath caught in my throat. Before me stretched a long expanse of elegantly set tables draped in pristine white linens. At least 30 people were seated, every relative we had, plus what seemed like half of my mother's old social circle. Olivia. My mother swept toward me, her eyes shimmering with emotion, enveloping me in a tight embrace. The familiar scent of her expensive perfume wrapped around me like a silk cocoon. I'm so happy you're here. Still in shock, I let her guide me to a seat. Across the table, Aunt Linda reached for my hand and squeezed it affectionately. You are such a wonderful daughter, she gushed, her eyes warm. Your mother couldn't stop talking about how you insisted on throwing her this incredible party. Everything is just spectacular. The foie gras is divine, and I hear the Wagyu beef is next. My stomach twisted as the reality of the situation settled in. My mother hadn't just planned a lavish birthday dinner, she had orchestrated a full-scale luxury event, expecting me to foot the bill without so much as a warning. I stared in mute horror as waiters moved seamlessly between tables, pouring glasses of wine from bottles that I knew cost $500 each. Trays of imported caviar, whole Maine lobsters, and Japanese Wagyu beef, at $400 per serving, arrived in waves. My brain scrambled to estimate the cost. $8,000. At least. Maybe more. A gentle clink, clink, clink rang through the room as Aunt Linda stood, champagne flute in hand, tapping it delicately with a silver spoon. The conversations died down as all eyes turned toward her. I'd like to make a toast, she announced, her face glowing with admiration. To my incredible niece, Olivia. Your generosity tonight shows just what an extraordinary daughter you are. The way you've taken care of your mother, always looking out for her, and now this. What a beautiful way to celebrate her special day. My pulse pounded in my ears. My hands trembled under the table. I couldn't let this go on. I'm sorry, I interrupted, my voice unsteady but firm. I have to stop you right there. The room fell into an eerie silence. My mother's beaming smile faltered, her face suddenly unreadable. I took a deep breath. I didn't arrange this dinner. I didn't choose this restaurant. I wasn't even aware this was happening until I walked through that door. A ripple of gasps traveled through the guests. A fork clattered onto a plate somewhere in the distance. My mother's expression darkened as she hissed, Olivia, don't be ridiculous. Of course, you're paying for this. Who else would? I pushed my chair back slowly, the sound of it scraping against the marble floor cutting through the silence. No, Mom. I'm not. I gestured toward the extravagant feast laid out before us. I offered to host a simple dinner at your home, or to order from your favorite Italian place. You told me you wanted to handle it yourself. You never once mentioned La Belle Maison. You never said you were inviting 30 people. Her voice wavered between disbelief and anger. But you always pay. You've been covering everything. For reasonable things, I shot back. For groceries. For small family dinners. For winter heating bills. Not this. I swept my hand over the table, where plates of overpriced delicacies sat half-eaten, and wine worth more than rent flowed freely. Her face turned red. You ungrateful, her voice cracked. After everything I've done for you. I let out a hollow laugh. Everything you've done for me? You mean trying to drain my college fund? Running Dad's company into the ground? You're right, Mom. That was unforgettable. The weight of my words crashed through the room like an earthquake. No one spoke. No one moved. I reached into my purse, pulled out my wallet, and calmly counted out $200. I placed the crisp bills on the table. "That covers my pork chop and a glass of wine," I said evenly. "Good luck with the rest." Then, without another word, I turned on my heel and walked out. The sound of my heels clicking against the marble floor echoed like a countdown. No one stopped me. No one called after me. The night air hit my skin like a shock of cold water as I stepped outside. I barely registered my own movements as I hailed the first taxi I saw. "Regency Plaza, please." As soon as I entered my hotel room, I shut off my phone, bracing for the inevitable storm. I knew what was coming: angry voicemails from my mother, disappointed messages from relatives, demands for an explanation. But for now, I just needed quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling as I stared out the window at the glowing city skyline. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't expected. Alone. And strangely, wonderfully free. The next morning, when I finally turned my phone back on, it nearly exploded in my hands. 47 missed calls from Mom. 28 from Aunt Linda. 15 from Uncle Frank. Dozens more from various relatives. The voicemail was full. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, then dialed my mother's number. She answered on the first ring. "Mom," I said carefully, my voice calm but unwavering. "I'm sorry about how things went down last night." I exhaled slowly. "I'm coming over now. We need to talk about what happened at the restaurant." I had honestly hoped, however slim the chance, that she would understand. That maybe, just maybe, she would realize how out of line it was to organize such a lavish event on someone else's dime without so much as a conversation. I couldn't have been more mistaken. "How dare you?" Her voice was so piercing that I instinctively pulled the phone away from my ear. "You selfish, ungrateful, narcissistic child. Do you even realize what you've done?" "Mom, if you had just told me." "Told you? You humiliated me. In front of everyone. Do you have any idea what happened after you stormed out like some entitled brat? Everyone had to scrape together $400 each to cover the bill. $400. The final total? $12,000. $12,000. My stomach dropped. "And you, with all your money, couldn't even pay for your own mother's birthday? You're a disgrace." My thoughts were spinning. 12,000. And they had kept ordering even after I left. "You think I'm selfish, Mom? Fine. Let me show you what selfish really looks like." I ended the call while she was still mid-sentence. The anger that had been shaking my hands melted into something colder, resolute, unshaken. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. First, I logged into my bank account and canceled the automatic transfer of $1,000 to her account. That was step one. Next, I made a phone call. "Hi, this is Olivia Mitchell. I need to arrange a vehicle retrieval." The Mercedes-Benz she drove was still in my name. Within 20 minutes, a tow truck was en route to collect it. Then, I navigated to my internet provider's website. 3 simple clicks, and her high-speed connection was scheduled for termination. Finally, I opened social media. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for only a moment before I typed. "Attention, family members. Effective immediately, I will no longer be covering any travel expenses for my mother or other relatives. Any previous arrangements have been canceled. Moving forward, please plan your own trips." I hit post and closed my laptop. It felt like closing a door, one that needed to be shut a long time ago. The backlash came fast. Within hours, my notifications were exploding with furious messages from relatives who had, until recently, never hesitated to accept my generosity. "How could you do this to your own mother?" Aunt Linda wrote, outraged. "After everything she sacrificed for you? You're a selfish, money-hungry brat," added Uncle Frank, the same man I had treated to an all-expenses-paid trip to San Francisco just months earlier. "Your father would be ashamed. Is this how he raised you? To abandon your family?" The messages kept rolling in, each one harsher than the last. My cousin Jessica, whom I had personally helped move into a new apartment, chimed in, "Don't bother coming to my wedding in September. I don't want someone so heartless there." Aunt Linda delivered another blow, "And you can forget about my 60th anniversary party next month. We don't need your money or your gifts." It was almost amusing in a way. How quickly they erased all the vacations, the dinners, the countless bills I had paid without hesitation. Not one of them mentioned the $12,000 bill they had been forced to split. Not a single one questioned why my mother had invited 30 guests to an extravagant restaurant where entrees started at $300, all while assuming I would cover the cost. That part of the story simply didn't exist in their minds. The first few weeks were the hardest. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects just to keep my mind occupied. My phone never stopped buzzing, unknown numbers, relatives using different lines to bypass my blocks. So, I changed my number. Some nights, I lay awake, questioning whether I had gone too far. But then I would remember all the times my mother had manipulated me, all the guilt trips, all the thinly disguised demands masquerading as affection. That birthday dinner wasn't an isolated event. It was simply the most blatant example of a pattern that had been there all along. 2 months after the restaurant debacle, my mother made another attempt to reach me. She used her neighbor's phone to leave a voicemail. "Olivia, honey, can we talk? I miss you. Things have been difficult. Maybe we could meet for coffee? Just the two of us." Her voice had lost its usual sharpness. It sounded hesitant, uncertain. For a brief moment, I wanted to believe she had changed, that she had finally seen the truth. But as I listened, I realized something. There was no apology, no accountability, no acknowledgement of what she had done. Just another attempt to pull me back in. I blocked the number. Life carried on. Without the constant financial drain of supporting my mother and various relatives, my salary stretched further than I had ever imagined. I earned another promotion at work. I took a solo trip to Europe. No one to entertain, no one to accommodate. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. Occasionally, I catch glimpses of my mother's life through mutual acquaintances or social media. She had to downsize again, moving into an even smaller place. She complains to anyone who will listen about her ungrateful daughter who abandoned her. My relatives, of course, nod along in sympathy. But notably, none of them have offered to support her the way I once did. Do I miss having a mother? Sometimes. But I miss the mother I needed, not the one I had. I miss the idea of family, not the reality of what mine had become, a web of people eager to take, but quick to condemn when I finally said enough. Maybe one day, my mother will have a genuine realization. Maybe she will finally understand that love isn't about financial obligation, that family is built on respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. Maybe, just maybe, she'll offer a real apology. One without conditions, without justifications. One that comes from a place of true understanding. If that day ever comes, I might be open to rebuilding something. Something different. Something with firm boundaries. But even then, I will never return to being the family's personal bank account. That chapter of my life is closed for good.